A24 turns 10 years old today, so let's celebrate some of its horror movies.
Well, sometimes that is better.
Hey everybody, what's up? KillJoy Jake here, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. Today, we are talking a little bit about A24 films, specifically the horror movies, so don't get upset if you don't see your favorite A24 film on this list. We're just talking horror movies today because that's kind of the whole point of this page. Now, before we get into this, I do want to talk about some honorable mentions. One dishonorable mention, which honest to God, I think is the worst movie I have ever seen in my entire life, is The Killing of a Sacred Deer. I love Yorgos Lanthimos, I think is how you pronounce his last name, Yorgos, whatever. I really enjoy his movies, but this is the most pretentious, crap movie I have ever seen in my life. The dialogue is awful, the direction is terrible, not a fan of it at all. I'm so sorry if you like that movie, but wow, this is the only A24 movie I've ever watched where I was like, this was an actual waste of my time. It Comes at Night is another movie that I appreciated, but definitely wasn't for me. It's a movie that I would recommend to other people though. It's just way too slow. It's way too slow. Not a whole lot happens in this movie. A lot of people do appreciate it for the same reasons that a lot of people appreciate The Blair Witch is how I feel about this movie, but I just don't care for it. It's not really for me. That movie though I can recognize as still being a good movie. Men is also kind of an honorable mention. I think this movie has some awesome visuals and great performances, beautiful cinematography, but ultimately just would not make it on the list at all. It's a cool movie. I think it's cool for what it is, but not a top 10. Coming in at number 10 is Under the Skin, a movie that is widely regarded as the best A24 horror movie. I just don't agree with that. I think this movie has one really cool thing about it, and it's the very end. I love it. It's great. Scarlett Johansson is phenomenal throughout this entire flick, but it's so small of a story that ends up being something way bigger towards the end, which is cool. But that's really all this movie has to offer. It's really nothing more than that besides some really cool shots. I think that this is a fun movie to watch once, but I don't ever see a point in watching it again. It's a cool alien movie, kind of, that's very vague and doesn't give you every little detail of what's going on. That makes it much more fun to watch, though, I think, but it's nothing I would watch for a second time. It's a good movie. Check it out if you haven't seen it, but nothing, like I said, just no rewatchability here, I don't think. There is such a thing as being too vague, and this movie definitely crosses that line for me. Coming in 9th place is Green Room, a movie that at first I didn't really care for, but the more I've watched it, the more I've come to appreciate it. The cast of this movie is amazing. Anton Yelchin, rest in peace, really an actor we lost way too soon, which honestly definitely influences this top 10 list a little bit. I just love this guy so much, and it is truly upsetting what happened to the guy. I think he was amazing in just about every single movie he did. If it was the Frighteners remake or the Star Trek movies, he was just incredible in everything, and that really elevated this movie for me a lot personally, because it's kind of just a slasher movie. It's nothing really that intense or different or crazy, but I have come to appreciate much more things about this film. Imogen Poots and Patrick Stewart are also phenomenal in this flick as well. Great performances around for this very paranoid and crazy movie. Like I said, I like this movie. I love Anton Yelchin, super underrated actor, and once again, it's horrible what happened to him, but this movie also didn't blow my mind. The other 8 movies that we're about to talk about were mind-blowing to me. These changed how I view horror movies after watching them, but these two are cool movies. I like Under the Skin and Green Room. They're cool, but they're nothing like the rest of A24's catalog that is unbelievably mind-blowing. Getting into number 8, a pick that I know I will get a comment about of people disagreeing with me, but hey, you know what? That's why we make these lists. That's why it's fun. It's all in good fun here too. That's what's great. Bodies is coming in number 8 with a amazing twist ending to this flick. As of when this video is releasing, this is A24's most recent film that has debuted, so I won't spoil the ending, but the twist ending of this movie is what makes this film for me. It's a truly jaw-dropping moment that I did not see coming at all, and I think the marketing of this movie really helped with that. Besides that, I do feel like the characters can get a little annoying at times, even though, yes, they do have some very silly lines throughout. This is kind of a satire on Gen Z overall, and I think for what this movie was trying to do, it accomplished that, and it's great for that reason. If you want to see me go a little more in-depth about this movie specifically, I have a big review video of it up here. Coming in 7th place is The Witch, or The Vitch, if you are just reading the stylized title, from Mr. Robert Eggers. I really enjoy this film, but definitely one of the most least accessible movies I've ever watched in my life. It's great, but even with subtitles on, this is a very tough movie to understand, and you have to watch it multiple times unless, you're someone who lives in the 1600s and speaks that way. With that being said, though, it's a very rewarding experience with some utterly disgusting and disturbing visuals throughout. It's a really fun movie. Some call it slow, but I kind of disagree with that. Maybe it's because I've seen it a few times. I do think that there's enough enough going on throughout every little layer of the plot to keep you invested, keep you interested. But like I said, the dialogue is so tough to understand. I think you definitely have to watch this movie twice or even 3 times to fully understand everything that is going on, which makes this kind of a tough watch and definitely one that I feel like is probably the most misunderstood on this entire list. But I still really like it, and I think it's a very rewarding experience if you can get past that aspect of it. The ending of this film is once again a jaw-dropping moment, as well as the baby scene early on. The entire third act of this is just utter chaos, and I love it so much. It's so well written. Anya Taylor-Joy's performance in this is phenomenal, as well as Ralph Ineson, who does not get enough credit for this movie. Honestly, the whole family is pretty damn great too. Harvey Scrimshaw also gives this wonderful monologue that's just so horrifying right before his death in the film. I don't know, there's great performances all around in this film. So much attention to detail about like getting the setting right. Natural light was the only thing that was used for most of the interior shots. That's not an easy feat to accomplish. Massive props to Mr. Robert Eggers for making this truly amazing film. This is also going to be a heartbreaking one for some, and I totally understand if this is your favorite A24 horror film, because it once again, another amazing flick. Coming in 6th place is Midsummer, a movie I absolutely love, but I've seen so many times I'm kind of sick of it. Midsummer, in my opinion, is a perfect movie to introduce people to A24 as a genre of movies, I think. It showcases everything that is great about these movies while also doing something new and original at the same time. Out of all the movies on this list, this is probably one of the easiest stories to follow, maybe besides Bodies, 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 but it's a really fun and rewarding movie as well, with some crazy sequences throughout. With a faster pace than Ari Aster's previous movie, Hereditary, Midsummer does a lot with its daytime setting as well. If you're not watching the director's cut, this entire movie pretty much, once you get to Sweden, takes place during the day, and there are some of the most horrific visuals I have ever seen in a horror film throughout this movie. Now, like I said at the beginning of this mini review that I'm doing mid-ranking video, which, trust me, is not the extent of my review for most of these movies, I have seen this movie like 25 times. Every time I try to get people into like A24 as a subgenre of horror, I typically show them this first. I feel like it's a perfect starting place for if you're trying to like enjoy these kind of movies. This is the one that feels the most like a popular horror film. Like, and also this is a movie that came out in 2019. It's relatively new, and I've seen it definitely at least 25 times in my life already, which is like, it's good. I like it. It's amazing. It's a masterpiece, but I've just seen it so many times. That's why it comes in at 6th place here. If you would have asked me this back in 2019 when I saw the film for the first time, I thought it was the best movie ever made. I was like blown away by this. It would have been like number 2 or number 1 on my list, but I have some different thoughts nowadays. Midsummer is an iconic, visually stunning masterpiece though that if you haven't seen yet, I highly recommend. If you've ever had a bad mushroom trip too, this is the movie for you. Coming in 5th place is Ex Machina, a movie that once again I just feel like is a total masterpiece on its own. It's a movie that really only features 3 main characters played by Alicia Vikander, Oscar Isaac, why did I mess that one up? That's like the one person I'm the most familiar with, and Domhnall Gleeson, which also is not an easy name to say. But these 3 are phenomenal as our main characters throughout this movie, and you don't need any more characters than that, really. Ex Machina kind of feels like a 2-hour episode of Black Mirror directed by Alex Garland, and I mean that in the best way possible. This is a very, very fun and rewarding movie as well. You have Alicia Vikander playing a robot who is like super sentient, is basically as close to being a human being as physically possible for a robot, and she just like gives this amazing performance in this movie. I love Oscar Isaac and Domhnall Gleeson. Why is that so hard for me to say? They're both great in this movie as well. Don't get me wrong. Like, if they weren't so great, this movie wouldn't work. But man, Ava is just an iconic horror villain character. Not even really a villain too. I think that's what's so interesting about this, is the moral dilemma of this entire movie and how messed up it kind of is. It's a movie that definitely leaves you with more questions than answers by the time the credits roll, and you don't really know how to feel about the whole situation. Besides Annihilation, this is probably my favorite from Mr. Alex Garland. I love this film. It's such a heavy, like, thinking movie too. Like, we can debate this movie all day, I think, which is what's so fun and so brilliant about it. Truly a terrifying movie as well towards the end. That little slow stab we get from Ava, there's something so creepy about that and inhuman. I just, how the robots are portrayed in this movie too, it's so wonderful. It's so well written. Coming in fourth place is Saint Maud, a movie that is criminally underrated and that a lot of people just don't like for some reason. I don't get it at all personally. I think this is an easy top 5 from all of A24 in general. Morfydd Clark gives possibly one of the best performances I have ever seen in a psychological horror movie, perfectly portraying the character of Maud, who is so messed up in her own head about some shit going on in her life. Man, I mean, what a disastrous fucking horror film. There is not a dull moment in this entire movie. Sometimes you are so uncomfortable watching Maud interact with people out in the real world that those sequences are so hard to watch, or maybe it's the dialogue between her and Amanda, perfectly portrayed by Jennifer L, by the way, in a, once again, another great kind of leading role in this movie. And wow, I mean, like, their conversations about like how different their ideologies are going back and forth is so uncomfortable to watch, but also just so excellently written. Few movies have me looking up the director and everything else they have done previously, but the moment I walked out of this theater, I looked up who the fuck directed that, because that was a genius movie. Whatever Rose Glass has up her sleeve for the next time around, I am there opening night. I am so excited for whatever she does in the future. Saint Maud is a genius commentary on religion that is shot gorgeously. The cinematography in this movie is just amazing in like this beachside town in the UK somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it was filmed. And people hate the word jump scare when it comes to A24 movies, but there are some jump scares in this movie. They're well executed, and I don't know, some people hate that about this movie, but I think it's genius. It's still a great psychological thriller. It can horror movies can have jump scares. That's totally fine. I don't think jump scares are cheap. They're very tough to set up. Anyone who thinks they're cheap, I think just has never made a movie before, because jump scares are very difficult to accomplish correctly, and there are many movies where they don't land all that well. So don't try to tell me that they're an easy way to scare people. They are very difficult to set up. Saint Maud has 2 of the best jump scares I have ever seen in movie history, and they made me nearly shit my pants the first time I saw this thing. I was petrified walking out of the theater for this movie, just like how I was with Hereditary, which you will find somewhere on this list later on. Saint Maud is yet another masterpiece. I think it comes in 4th place for me though, because I have not watched it as much as the 3 above this one. That's really the only deciding factor here. Like I said, this is an unbelievably tight list. Like, these are neck and neck. I had to think about this all morning. Coming in 3rd place is The Lighthouse, a movie that I have watched so many times and just have not gotten sick of. The Lighthouse, just like Ex Machina, is a movie with a very minimal cast that does so much with it. And if it wasn't for the fantastic actors portraying these 2 characters, I don't think it would work at all. Another movie from Robert Eggers that I personally feel is his best because of the addition to humor here, something that is very much so needed in his other 2 films, I think. The Lighthouse is a masterful psychological horror movie all about gaslighting. I think the genius thing about this movie is it's so vague, but like at the same time, you really don't get a definite answer as to what the fuck is going on here. Who is the crazy one? I've watched this so many different times, and honest to God, there is still an argument to be made about both entities here, of who is really the crazy one and who is not. I'm definitely leaning towards Willem Dafoe being like the one that is running this whole situation and making it all crazy, but man, I'm still not 100% on that, because there's so many different clues that would lead you to believe that Robert Pattinson's character is also completely criminally insane. The visuals in this movie are disgusting, as well as its dialogue, and that is something I can really appreciate. Speaking of top 10 lists, if there's a top 10 list out there for like most shocking things I've ever seen in a movie, the mermaid vagina is definitely on there somewhere. Yet another masterpiece on this list. Are you getting sick of me saying that? Oh my God, I can't help myself when it comes to these films. Coming in 2nd place is X, a movie that maybe has a little bit of recency bias for me and why I'm putting this one up there so high, but it's truly just a perfect little slasher film, and that's what I really appreciate about it. Ty West has taken one of the oldest ideas known to fucking horror and basically made it original again by not doing all that much. Slasher movies are probably the hardest things to do right nowadays because like they've been done so many different ways at this point. It's really tough to find something original from a new slasher film that isn't something that's already part of an already existing franchise. So X is truly this crazy outlier that I think is going to stand the test of time. Conceptually, I feel like it's one of the most difficult movies to make on this entire list, and that's why it ranks so high for me. The characters are across the board perfectly written. It's an unbelievably airtight script with some amazing kills throughout that are set up really nicely with some lines of dialogue early on in the film. My only diss towards the film is some of the dialogue is a bit too telling, like they quite literally tell you exactly what is happening on screen or what they're trying to portray with certain characters sometimes, but I think it works considering the camp of this movie. I almost feel like it was done intentionally too for certain scenes, and for that reason, that's why I kind of don't take it as a diss. It's something I wouldn't have personally done if I was making this film, but hey, Ty West is clearly a better filmmaker than some douchebag who still lives with his parents. This is, in my opinion, the best film Ty West has made to date, like by a long shot. I love his movies, but this is easily number one. X is a fucking genius movie that is so scary and so much fun throughout, with some crazy unlikely killers. I have a much bigger review of this film as well up here, where I go way more in depth for it. This is a ranking video, so I'm kind of just doing summaries. And in first place, to nobody's surprise if you've been watching this channel for a long time, is Hereditary, a movie that I really need to do a big old nasty review video on because I love this film so much. Being the feature film debut of Ari Aster, whose new movie Disappointments Boulevard comes out next year, Hereditary is one of the best tragedies ever written, in my opinion. Toni Collette gives what I think is the best performance in a horror movie from the 2010s, like across the board, in a role where she was truly robbed of a fucking Oscar. I cannot say that enough. The entire cast is great too, including Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, Ann Dowd, and Gabriel Byrne, who all give fantastic performances in this movie. The big criticism I often hear of Hereditary is that most people don't like the ending. To me, I feel like this entire movie was setting up the ending, and I think if you go back and watch it one more time, you'll realize that. The entire first scene of the movie during the funeral is genius to me because you have characters there that seem so insignificant, you only see their face like once, that actually end up coming back for the final scene where they're massive parts of it and they're just standing there completely naked, which I think is great. One dude who is smiling at Charlie early on is the same dude who's smiling at Alex Wolff's character standing in the doorframe completely naked in his house, which, let me tell you, a random dude standing in my kitchen naked is absolutely my biggest fear ever now. Oh, wait a minute, scratch that. Actually, my biggest fear is Toni Collette hanging out in the corner of my room like a spider and then floating out of the door for some fucking reason. The ending sequence of Hereditary is, in my opinion, the scariest fucking thing I have ever watched in my life. It's a genius sequence that is set up so well by its slow burn first two acts that when we finally get to the last 15 minutes, it is so fucking outrageously scary. I can barely even watch it. Hereditary is really special to me too because it kind of catapulted me much more further into the horror genre. I was much more of a casual fan up until I saw this movie. This film just changed my life and everything that I kind of thought about movies. When I saw this, I realized how fucking cool horror movies are after watching this, and I needed to watch literally everything else that had ever been made. I love this film so much, and one day I'll do a much deeper, in-depth analysis of it because it really does deserve that, but obviously this is just a ranked video, and wow, we are going on for really long. I've been recording for almost an hour now. This is going to be a nightmare to edit. Now, obviously, your guys' top 10 is going to look much different than mine, so make sure to leave it in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching this new ranking video. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, support me on Patreon, do all that YouTuber crap. I would appreciate it. And as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.